What's up, everybody? Welcome to a very special edition of Established Run's trade deadline analysis show. I'm Drew Dinkmeyer, joined by Mike Gallagher and Mark Dankenbring. We had Justin Fan for a split second, but the corporate overlords over at Underdog swooped in and needed him for their content. Understandable. So we'll see if we get Justin later on. But we are here to break down all the trades. We'll see if any news comes in that shakes things up further. But there's been a ton of movement in the NBA in the last 24 to 48 hours specifically, shaking up the entire landscape of the league, both from a playoff implication standpoint, from a DFS standpoint, season-long fantasy standpoint. So here with me to break it down, Mark Dankenbring, Mike Gallagher. Dank, you ready to build the rest of this analysis brick by brick as usual? How are you, my man?
You know it. Yeah, I'm doing well. Just prepping kind of the rundown for the show and what he wanted to hit on. Like, it's just such a laundry list of moves. Honestly, I had forgotten about the Pirtle trade from yesterday already, just with the flurry of everything that's gone on. So really exciting. And, the NBA is just wild with how things change season by season, month by month. It's kind of hard to settle in and have takes that can sound good for a year or two on end. So just really exciting stuff all around. And really excited to break it down with you guys.
Gallagher, how are you? The land of the land of the rising sun, the land of Kevin Durant. Yep. How are you on this fine Thursday?
Doing good. Yeah, trade talks broke down with Underdog. We thought we had a deal, but we thought we wanted Justin Fan, and they just gave us a fan, literally a stealing fan.
Yeah, there was a miscommunication.
Like Marshawn Brooks, Dylan Brooks.
Exactly, but, it was the wrong Brooks.
We're good. We're good. Yep. But
all right,
let's do this.
Let's kick things off. Gallagher, I'll start with you. I want to kind of talk through this in the context of trade deadline winners and trade deadline losers, and then we can get into the nitty gritty on each of the individual deals while we kind of talk through them. But Mike, why don't we start with you? Who is one of your biggest trade deadline winners from this past 48 hours or so?
I mean, it's got to be the Suns. Like, it's so hard to get a player like that, and to pay basically Rudy Gobert price is pretty much where we're at for the best player the Suns have ever had, the best player 90% of teams have ever had on their team. It's Kevin Durant. He's still very good. Sure, you've only got the back end of his prime, but he fits any system. It's Kevin Durant. Who cares? You're giving up all those picks. I love Mikal. I think Cam Johnson's a good player. I think the Suns definitely won the trade deadline. You get a new owner, makes and just totally makes one of the biggest trades we've seen in a while for a guy that we didn't know was really on the block. And to get him at a lot, but to go from they were 18-1 to win the title, and now they're 4-1 to win the title. It's hard to do that, and the Suns just came through and then swooped in the middle of the night. I think there's no doubt they won the deadline.
Are they your favorites to win the title now?
I think so. I mean, I just trust Kevin Durant. I think this team needed somebody like that. I think Durant's kind of got the pedigree. It's pretty close between them and the Nuggets. The Warriors, I think, actually got a little better today too. Getting GPT, that was really, really big.
The entire Western Conference got a lot better.
Yeah, the entire Western Conference did. But I've always been a Kevin Durant guy. I think the Suns, they need a little bit more. They need some bias stuff to kind of break their way. But it's pretty close. I think they're in the mix. I wouldn't say they're the clear favorite, but they're definitely one of the favorites now.
Yeah, you can see the updated depth chart here in front of you on Phoenix. Dank, what stands out to you in terms of what the Suns might need to be looking to shore up in the buyout market, and where potential vulnerabilities for them in terms of playoff implications?
Yeah, I think it's such a big time move for them in the short term. I'm a little worried about the ramifications for them long term with CP3 continuing to age. Kevin Durant's 34, not necessarily the cleanest bill of health. And same, with Devin Booker over the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of lower extremity injuries with him in the hamstring. And so, I think this makes the window for them, still in the next couple of years. And obviously Katie's locked up long term. So, to me, I'm looking more at the guards here a little bit, as I mentioned, just with CP3 getting a bit older, not necessarily super reliable in terms of lasting 4 series in the playoffs. So, I think Cameron Payne coming back for them will be huge if he can get healthy and contribute there. I do think, Landry Shamet and Damian Lee are fine 2 guards, but I think kind of having more of a a three. TJ Warren's not really too much of a stretch three. He's more of a mid-range specialist. So I think kind of having, more of a 3-and-D wing that's a little more reliable than Shaman and Damian Lee, I think is, probably up there. And obviously they gave away two great ones in Bridges and Cam Johnson. So that's kind of the void I see for them as of now. I think the Bucks are still the favorite. I think should be the favorite to win the whole title. I do think the Suns are probably now the favorite in the West after this move, but I do think it makes them a little, more fragile in terms of just their depth moving forward. And if either CP3 or KD were to go down in the playoffs or Booker, I'm not sure that they'd be able to withstand that.
Yeah, that's certainly the big concern with them is going to be depth going forward. I think they can cover things up with Chris Paul a little bit. I think Booker or Kevin Durant, just because of the lack of wing depth, would start to really show some vulnerabilities against some of these higher class Western Conference teams. Mike, from a DFS or season long perspective, in terms of beneficiaries here, it's kind of hard when you're adding this much usage into the equation for other players to benefit. What are your expectations in terms of who is a biggest individual loser or winner from the Suns for DFS or season long going forward?
Well, it's worth noting Kevin Durant's still going to be out till the break, possibly longer. So there could be a lot of minutes. They're probably going to pick up somebody in the buyout, whether it's Reggie Jackson or whoever. They had to pick somebody up because their depth after their big four is pretty gross. We don't know how many minutes TJ Warren could play. Maybe the Suns will treat it a little bit differently. They're pretty cautious with their medical staff. But in the short term, like Torrey Craig has to play a ton. Not a very good per minute guy, but I expect him to kind of play a bunch. We'll probably see a lot of small ball lineups, a lot of Damian Lee at 3. He's a guy who could benefit off the bench. Really good shooter as well. We'll see if Darius Basie could maybe find new footing in this newfound area. Certainly not a guy I'm looking to pick up, but I expect Craig and Booker's minutes to ramp up here in a hurry. But no one really too attractive because Booker is still going to be carrying the torch, and it's not like these guys are great per minute guys.
Now, we'll talk about the Phoenix side of this deal. I had like 4 teams that I felt were pretty clear winners. We'll go through each of them during the course of the show. Phoenix was absolutely on that list. I think just they were sort of stuck in a position where it's really hard to see how they were good enough right now, and sort of hard to see how they're good enough long term because CP3 is aging and they would need to make more moves to kind of solidify the roster with more superstar talent around Booker and Ayton and Bridges. It was a good foundation, but it wasn't quite like deep enough to be like, okay, you add one player away and we're good. And it wasn't quite young enough to be able to rely on more growth really carrying them. So I thought they were kind of stuck in between, and this was at least a direction. It's a direction that's pushing all their chips in the middle for a year or two, but it's a direction that's closer to a championship. And right now I would say, if everybody's healthy in a 7-game series, and this team is able to coalesce as we'd expect, this team's going to be very, very difficult to beat. So I do think they were winners. I do think the price they paid was hefty, but I think they have a clear direction now that they're in. And then on the other side of this, I actually had Brooklyn as winners at this trade deadline as well. Now, it's under the context of once Kyrie decides that he wants out and he's not going to play for you the rest of the season, it's under that context. So obviously under the context of they had won 18 of 20 games, they were starting to look like they're rounding into form. They looked like a potential championship contender, and then they have to blow everything up. That sucks. That's a losing situation. But their front office had no control over that, really. Kyrie made that decision, and they moved swiftly and aggressively in addressing that situation. And I think long-term also probably built some credibility up with superstar players because of moving Kevin Durant, which is now being reported that was basically promised to him in the offseason, that if things did not work out during the course of the season, they would work to find him the partner that he wanted, which was Phoenix. So they do that. They also get 5 first-round picks in the deals for Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. They get Mikal Bridges, who's a great young player to be able to build around. They get a bunch of wing depth, which I thought they could leverage a little bit more at the trade deadline. They moved Jay Crowder to Milwaukee for some second-round picks there and get a bunch there. So they restocked the cabinet on draft picks. They have a lot of financial flexibility. They have a couple young building blocks in Mikal Bridges and Nick Claxton now to kind of work around. They clear the deck for Cam Thomas to see whatever they have from Cam Thomas. They give an opportunity to kind of rebuild Ben Simmons potentially with nobody else around him, low pressure situation. We'll see if that changes anything. I doubt it will, but at least it's an opportunity. I thought, all things considered, given the situation that Kyrie Irving sort of put this franchise in, I think Brooklyn did a winning job. I thought they got more than I would have expected of a team that's under pressure to sell. Gallagher, what are your thoughts on how Brooklyn did at the deadline here?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to just trade guys who want to get traded, and they got back. We thought they got back enough in the Kyrie trade. We just mentioned they got a hefty price tag for Kevin Durant. That's kind of what it is. I'm thought they got, they got what they should have got. I think they definitely get credit. I would have liked to see them dump more guys, just because it's pretty funky. You got all these defenders. It's just a really weird roster balance. So I would have liked to see them do a little bit more. We'll definitely call them winners to get these pieces that, and I'm surprised, they wanted to keep Mikal, they wanted to keep, Royce, Dorian Finney-Smith, all these guys are just championship caliber defensive players.
I think they needed another week. I think they needed more time.
Yeah.
I think that's really what happened, is like the Kyrie stuff came about pretty tight to the deadline. They moved on that pretty quickly. And then they probably were spending a lot of time figuring this stuff out with Kevin Durant.
Mm-hmm.
And just to like not have very much time to control the market and leverage all these defensive wings that they had with Dorian Finney-Smith, with Royce O'Neal, with Jay Crowder, with Mikal Bridges. I just think they were kind of put in a tough spot in terms of time. It will be interesting to see this offseason, because defensive-minded wings that can shoot are always wanted within this league. So there will still be a place. And the contract that Bridges is under and Dorian Finney-Smith and Cam Johnson are under are all very reasonable. So I think there will be opportunities to move things around in the offseason, but I definitely think the best time to move these guys is at the deadline. I just think they ran out of time.
Yeah, I'm really surprised the Grizzlies didn't. I'm surprised the Grizzlies didn't. Or they were probably in contact with the Nets a lot, but any of Royce or Mikal or DFS, Cam Johnson, like that, I feel like they would be great fits on the Grizzlies. I'm surprised that Kennard was kind of their only big move there today.
Yeah, we'll talk more about the Grizzlies in a bit. From a DFS season-long perspective, Mike, who are the big winners on Brooklyn? It's got to be Cam Thomas, 340-point games in a row, and now that the ship is cleared for the run, the runway is clear for Cam to take off. What are your thoughts here on the Brooklyn side?
Yeah, Cam Thomas is going to get pretty much all the shot he wants. We'll see if he continues to come off the bench. We'll see how long he's starting. Maybe he finds a way into the starting lineup. We talked about the injury show where maybe he just starts over Spence to make Spence the sixth man. We talked about Spencer being the sixth man with Dallas, but he's a huge winner. A guy who wasn't even in the rotation like 2 weeks ago. So Spencer Dinwiddie, also really, really big winner. I think Mikal Bridges is a small winner too. Guy doesn't miss games, so he'll have more offensive responsibility. Dorian, kind of net neutral. I think Nick Claxton is kind of TBD. Maybe has more offensive responsibilities, but we'll see how he can get the ball and all that stuff with just a really funky fit. But yeah, clearly Cam and Spencer are pretty big winners.
In Dank, what are your thoughts in terms of, from the DFS seasonal side of things? Any other notes you wanted to leave here on the Brooklyn situation?
Not too much. If Ben Simmons can stay healthy and figure it out, I think, this is an interesting team for him to be around in terms of just kind of a lot of spot up shooters. And he should be the primary ball handler, especially if Dinwiddie comes off the bench. So, it's as we've harped on a few times, it's guys with a lot of similar skill sets. So I think it will be kind of difficult night in and night out to parse through, who we want to target. And I would imagine, the Nets are going to kind of mess around with starting lineups here and just try and figure out different fits with all the different players that they acquired. There's very little, that's been steady here. So I think it's going to be, we're going to get kind of like a tryout for them and probably a lot of movement within the starting lineup.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see if there is another gear for Ben Simmons, or if it is what it is now. But if there's another gear for him in terms of handling the ball and being able to kind of break down into the paint and just like get the ball to open shooters in an offense that's moving fast, this team can play fast. They have lots of athletes now, and they should play fast instead of the KD and Kyrie, who play relatively fast on their own, but in the half court it's a lot of ISO ball. Like this team should be able to try to get out in transition. It's a last gasp effort to try to kind of rebuild value there. All right, we've talked on Brooklyn and Phoenix in this massive Kevin Durant trade. Winners for each of us, for Gallagher and myself at the deadline, both of these teams. Dank, who is a winner for you at the trade deadline here?
Yeah, I think the Clippers are a pretty big winner here. I think the Bones Highland trade for them was a really pleasant surprise. They've been targeting, or at least it's been rumored to have been targeting Russell Westbrook. Obviously, they went after John Wall in the offseason. I think Bones is just such a better fit there as kind of a microwave scorer off the bench that can come in a playoff series and provide that spark if needed. So combining him with Norm Powell off the bench, they really have a lot of firepower. I think the Mason Plumlee move, that was a little surprising to me because we've seen the Clippers over the years, like to go small in the most important moments. But I think that, just kind of thinking through that almost seemed like a Jokic trade to me. If they're planning on playing in the playoffs, like Mason Plumlee is going to be a great asset for them to go up against Jokic, because now you have him and Zubac there, and 12 fouls to work with and another just big body to throw at him, and he provides a little more facilitation for the Clippers as well. I think a lot of times, with the Clippers, we see this like the ISO ball scoring with Paul George and Kawhi. So I think Plumlee, adds an element at center there that can just have the ball movement. In the second unit, like I said, with Norm Powell and Bones Highland, like they're just so deep at this point. So a lot of different chess pieces, to throw out there, as you always like to say, Dink. And I think it's just Eric Gordon is a pretty similar player to Luke Kennard, so I think that's kind of just a little sideways movement there. But overall, I think the Clippers are really, really well equipped to face this Western Conference in the playoffs.
Yeah, the thing for me for the Clippers, a couple things. One, they got rid of long-term salary. Luke Kennard is under contract for multiple years. They only brought back expiring contracts in terms of Mason Plumlee, in terms of Eric Gordon. That helps their long-term tax situation as well, so saves them some money in a position where I don't think they got worse. Two, we've talked about for a number of years, basically since they made the Paul George and Kawhi deals, that this was going to be a team that was going to be short resources to try to infuse the team with young talent that could kind of take them to another level. Bones Highland has had his faults defensively. He's one of the worst defensive players in the league at this point in his career, but he is a very exciting offensive player and a young player that they had no other way to get this type of player other than taking advantage of a situation where a team and the player have soured the relationship, and you can kind of get them relatively affordable. So to get off of long-term salary, to get a young player with upside long-term, and then to sort of, fill some holes on the roster in terms of depth with a little bit more size, specifically, as you mentioned, to combat having to potentially face Jokic in the playoffs, which is going to be a real problem for them if they do meet them in the playoffs. And this team is a little bit thin on the wings, but they were always going to be super dependent on Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. And Terrence Mann is a utility knife that they can use all around. If they do get Russell Westbrook in the buyout market, which has been rumored as well, then you can basically slide Terrence Mann to being like a 2-3 as a backup when he subs out. I imagine he'd start still, and Westbrook would be kind of a guy off the bench in that scenario. But I really liked this deadline move for the Clippers. I thought they met a bunch of needs, and I also thought they set themselves up better for the long run, which is hard to do when you're a team in this situation. Mike, what are your thoughts on the Clippers deadline?
Yeah, you guys mostly nailed it. I don't have much else to add. I'll just add that Tyler didn't really like the fit with Norm Powell, Reggie Jackson, and Luke Kennard, and now it's clear who he likes. He likes Norm Powell, and he's got new guys in there. So, yeah, he definitely crushed it. Didn't have much to work with. You got Bones, way cheaper than we thought. Eric Gordon, pretty cheap. Didn't cost you much. I think that for what they were given and what they have, couldn't have asked really for a better deadline.
What are your thoughts on the DFS season-long ramifications here for the Clippers going forward?
Yeah, so the first thing is we're going to get minutes caps on, and that also helps with this more depth. We're going to see minutes caps on Kawhi and Paul George until the deadline. I think it's going to probably continue after the deadline.
The All-Star break.
I'm sorry. Yeah, All-Star break. My bad. Got deadline in my brain. That's going to be something that'll help. Definitely, as you mentioned, Terrence Mann's minutes ceiling goes way down here with more bodies to throw. He's really important for his role, but Marcus Morris is also a guy who's going to be, who's been like kind of relevant, right? He's kind of it's just going to be so hard for him to carry minutes in a significant way with usage and all that stuff. We'll see if this affects the Zubats. Lots of commentary from Tyler about playing him too many minutes, and now he has no reason to play him big minutes now that he has way more outs with a lot of wings. Obviously, Mason Plumlee as well. So, really covered all the bases here.
he's the first name. Zubats is the first name that came to me that was like, this is a big deadline loser situation for if it's a Zubats, because he's a guy that in the past had played like 22. I remember doing season-long projections coming into this year and looking at this roster and being like, I got a problem where Zubats has never played this many minutes, but I got to fill out center minutes somehow. And I was struggling, and we were talking about and Fan was really high on Zubats coming into the season. And I think he had him at like 26, 27 minutes. I was like, he's never played like more than 22. How do I get him there? So I think Zoo is going to go back to like the 24 range instead of the 28, 29. So I think that makes him a pretty, relatively big loser. And then I think, it's a win for Bones simply because things weren't working out in Denver, and there wasn't much ceiling for things to work out in Denver. I think the ceiling is still relatively limited. It's like a Lou Williams type, microwave scorer off the bench, but at least it's a fresh start for Bones. And I think that in of itself is a plus, and obviously a huge downgrade for Mason Plumlee. But anybody who was paying attention knew this was coming. Like Mason Plumlee was not going to make it through the deadline with the Charlotte Hornets. And so his value just absolutely falls off a cliff. Goes from a player that was like, producing at like a top 50, top 60 level over the last 3 or 4 weeks to a player that is waiver wire fodder in season long and irrelevant in DFS unless somebody's hurt almost immediately. Okay, Gallagher, any other winners you wanted to tackle on the deadline here?
I mean, we could definitely talk Lakers, right?
Let's do it.
I
think they're big winners as well.
Yeah, huge winners, pretty low cost, giving up really that 2027 top 4 protected pick. I think I just updated their depth charts. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Just to note, everyone, with the screen stuff, I'm not done updating depth charts. Probably by the end of the day, they'll be updated for you guys. I'm working on that right now, way behind. But so there's a lot of stuff that looks really bad on there, but because I haven't touched it in months. Anyways, yeah, they're picking up a lot of shooting. D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, huge. Picking up a more depth, Mo Bamba, who could also space the floor. I think that's very noteworthy. Vanderbilt, another wing defender. They checked really every box except on-ball defense, getting rid of Beverly. So, they're going to ask a little bit more out of Troy Brown, Lonnie Walker, and those guys because D'Angelo can't defend, Malik can't defend. You don't really want LeBron picking up ball handlers. So they've got some things to do there. But they're in way better shape than they were to only give up that first, and everything else was an asset. Beverly was an asset. Westbrook was an asset. So the fact that they can fill out a roster, have NBA caliber talent on their team, they don't have to play. Austin Reeves doesn't have to be a folk hero anymore. They crushed it, man. Just to get the Wolves wanted to get off D'Angelo, they were happy to take him. The Jazz just wanted that pick, they got it, and they were willing to do it. And they still have the 2029 down the line, so. Yeah, I mean, they couldn't have done it any better than this. I feel like they really covered it. And the only thing, the only wing that got really traded that could bring on ball defense was Jalen McDaniels, I felt like today. Yeah. Matisse Thybulle's funky, and of course the freaking Sixers get him. But yeah, I mean, just completely crushed it. Definitely, we talked about this yesterday on the playback as well. That they just really, really came up here to fill up all this stuff with only giving up that one pick. They crushed it, man. We love to go over Plinka and the Lakers, and they're the butt of a joke on a lot of times because this roster's been so bad. But they knew who the sellers were, and they attacked them with really was as far as draft pick capital goes. That was probably the best pick given up. Right, we saw all these second round picks, not a lot of firsts today. Yep. That was the market, and they got great value for it. So just hats off to them. It was really a good trade deadline.
Yeah, just to recap, Tank, before you hop in here, they sent out Russell Westbrook, Thomas Bryant, Damian Jones, Juan Toscano-Anderson, Pat Beverly, a 2027 first, and then 1 second-round pick. There were a lot of second-round picks exchanged, but net total was 1 second-round pick. So a top 4 protected first that turns into a second if it's not conveyed, which is incredible protections. We talked about this on playback last night, and a second. So if they're really bad in 2027, which is 4 years away, it's possible it could end up being just 2 seconds in this whole thing that they're giving out. And they got D'Angelo Russell, Mo Bamba, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, and Rui Hachimura. I mean, they got 5 players that I think you could comfortably say like Dar is an upgrade over Russ. Probably, I think we'd
at least fit wise.
Yeah, for certainly for shooting and stuff. Bamba probably an upgrade over Thomas Bryant. I mean, they're probably pretty similar. At worst, doesn't really matter. Jared Vanderbilt definitely an upgrade over Damian Jones, like clearly. Malik Beasley, definitely an upgrade over Juan Toscano-Anderson, especially when you consider fit and role. And Rui Hachimura, versus Pat Bev, or you could say Rui versus JTA, and then Beasley versus Pat Bev. In terms of fits, great across the board. And so maybe that costs you at the end of the day either maybe a mid to late first and a second, or maybe 2 seconds. That seems like an incredible haul at the deadline for the Lakers. Obviously, the entire Western Conference got a lot better. So the question is, what does this mean in terms of the Lakers making a playoff run? And Dank, what are your thoughts there in terms of, is this a team that you feel confident we're going to see in the play-in, and how much of a run can they make?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. The West is really, all of our winners have come from the West here. They, everyone really loaded up, and the East stayed pretty stagnant. So, in terms of the playoffs, I think this team is definitely built better around LeBron in terms of shooting and spacing. That's kind of what we harp on with team building around LeBron all the time. Defensively, I think it's tough to look at this projected starting lineup and feel great about it. Obviously, you have the anchor of Anthony Davis. To fall back on, and maybe in the playoffs, LeBron can ramp it up a bit. But I do think defensively here, and just the continuity, you mentioned 5 new players and 4 likely to be involved in the rotation, on a nightly basis. And at this point, they're 13th in the West. So, they have to make up some ground. It's not like they're already locked into the playoffs and kind of, can mess around with different combinations to hopefully build some chemistry. They have to start winning right away. So, I do think these moves allow them to do that. And in terms of the playoffs, I think at this point they're on a collision course. If they do make the play-in, they're probably going to play the Nuggets or the Grizzlies in the first round. And, I don't think that would turn out too well for them. So, I do think this definitely gives them a better chance, but I'm a little skeptical on just how quickly it can come together for them with all the new pieces and, new coach there and everything. I think overall an upgrade, but not necessarily with all the strength added as well in the Western Conference. I'm not sure it necessarily moves the needle too much for their playoff hopes.
Gallagher, your thoughts are the Lakers somebody teams are going to be afraid to face in that first round? Are they going to be the team in the play-in that everybody's anxiously watching if they're going to make it through?
Pretty obvious, right? I mean, it's LeBron, it's AD. They've got weapons now. A lot of funky fits, and just I think it's pretty. Do you guys feel differently? They're if anyone that's below what
right now you've got. Right now in the mix you've got New Orleans, Minnesota, Golden State.
New Orleans is gonna write itself. So I think if you're talking about teams who are going to be vying for that 9-10 seed, you'd be talking about Portland, Oklahoma City.
Let's go through
Minnesota.
This.
I guess Minnesota. Would be
if New Orleans is going to write itself and Golden State's going to write itself.
Yeah.
Then who are the teams that are falling out of the top 6? Sacramento and Dallas? Do they both fall out?
No.
In terms of teams
I think Portland's probably falling out.
I think Portland and the Jazz there too are the
Jazz
teams that I think.
Yeah.
Well,
the Jazz are already out too.
But if we're talking about teams that are likely to fit in the play-in, there's only 6 spots that are not in the play-in. So Denver and Memphis are 2 of those for sure. Sacramento's got a really big head start in the win-loss column right now on that. And then you've got Dallas, Phoenix, and the Clippers, along with Pels, Timberwolves, Warriors. We think Blazers fall off. We think Jazz fall off. We think Thunder fall off. But we could easily have the Warriors in this play-in situation as well.
Okay. If you're asking me who I'd rather play, if I'm Denver, who would I rather play, the Warriors or the Lakers? I mean, that's the Warriors, right? There's no question.
You'd rather play the Warriors than the Lakers?
I'm sorry. No. I'm sorry. I'd rather not play the Warriors. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
So, in terms of teams that you could see realistically fall in the play-in, who do you think are the teams that are the biggest threats to the number 1 seed? Warriors number 1. Would you have Lakers number 2? Would you have Pelicans number 2? Where do the Lakers fall?
I don't really trust the Lakers all the way yet. Okay. They have on-ball defense concerns, man. Vanderbilt, we see him guard on-ball. That's a big concern for me, especially when you have so many good wing perimeter scorers on the other side. And you've got to worry about the chemistry, and you got to worry about AD staying healthy, and you got to worry about LeBron's aging. There's a lot of concerns for me. I think the Pelicans getting Zion back, I feel better. They've been playing a lot better since they got Brandon Ingram going here. So I think they're, I trust them to be in there a little bit more. And it's going to be hard. The Lakers are going to have to really, really grind their way to get a 7 or an 8 seed, and it's not going to be easy. So Yeah,
Push
I
push
think
comes
they're a
to
little more.
shove. Push comes to shove. If you had to bet it right now, we're through the play-in. The playoffs are starting. That opening weekend. Are the Lakers in it? Gallagher.
I don't think so.
Ooh.
That's
Dank?
a that's I mean that's a tough hill to climb, man. But I
Uh,
think
I'm
they
gonna
got a
I'm
shot.
I'm gonna say no too because I think the Pelicans have a good chance to end up in the play-in, and I would take them and the Warriors ahead of the Lakers as well as kind of ranking. So I think the Lakers are still gonna be on the outside looking in.
All right. All right.
We're trying though. You think so? What about you, Dank? You gonna dodge it?
I am torn. I will dodge it.
Yeah, it's tough.
So it really comes down to who ends up in that play-in. But yeah, it's close. The Lakers definitely fixed some things in a big way. But
Hmm.
if I had to make a bet now, I'd bet no as well. So
Hmm.
I'm with you guys for right now. All right, let's spend a little bit of time on some other smaller winners, and then I want to move to some of the losers of the trade deadline. Some teams that we can bash because that's really fun too. Some other small winners. I just note that I thought Philadelphia did an amazing job. It's such a small transaction, but changing Matisse Thybulle into Jalen McDaniels and picking up a second round pick in the process just seemed, and lowering their luxury tax bill is just incredible. Daryl Morey does it again. Amazing job. Jalen McDaniels is a really strong role player. I know you have been a huge supporter of the McDaniels family, Jaden, Jalen, and Mike McDaniels. Gallagher, what are your thoughts on the 76ers trade deadline?
Yeah, I mean, great. I mean, they picked up, like I said, probably one of the better 3-and-D wings. They're losing Tybal, but they couldn't play him on offense. That you need shooting really bad. He's obviously not a great shooter. Gives you length. They don't really want to play PJ Tucker big minutes. That gives them another answer with more offense as well. So, I mean, it was pretty obvious. They had McDaniel circled as the guy they wanted, and they're sharp. It was a guy I've been saying it was good fit for the Warriors. Every team could use someone like McDaniels.
Yep.
Obviously, low risk move, low cost move. What do you don't need to change much. You got Harden, you got your team, you got your 6 core guys, you got pretty good rotation pieces to fill in. You're adding another one that could be helpful. Throw another body at Giannis. We saw him guard Giannis a lot the other day, or I guess the other week it would be. So yeah, just a classic, hit singles move. And that's what they did, and it was a single that drove into a pretty effective single.
Of the teams in the Eastern Conference that are contending for this year, we talked about Brooklyn as winners given the circumstances, but teams that are contending for this year was, all smaller transactions. Milwaukee adds Jay Crowder, Boston adds Mike Muscala, Cleveland does nothing, Miami does nothing. The Knicks add Josh Hart. I don't know if we throw them in contenders range in the East yet, but is Philadelphia the one that won the trade deadline in the Eastern Conference in terms of the contenders?
I think so. Go ahead, Hank.
Yeah, I think the Bucks still want it, a bit more. Maybe it's just because I prefer them ahead of the Sixers, and I think their moves are relatively similar, and the type of piece they added, and I think getting the Nets kind of out of the conversation there just helps all the teams up top. So I think the Bucks and Sixers are kind of 1A and 1B there up top in terms of winners.
Yeah, I thought Josh Hart
Gallagher?
was a fine pickup. Definitely a Tibbs guy. Rebounding. Really good rebounding wing. Tibbs is going to love that. So, definitely a pretty good kind of lowish risk move there. So, I feel like the Knicks didn't have a big splash. We saw the Levine stuff, but nothing wrong with that. They definitely like their team. They're playing generally pretty good basketball. Pretty much, I think, a lock for the play at this point. We'll see if they can make some noise and get out of it, but. Yeah, it's kind of odd how the West was just so busy and the East just didn't have much going on. They're just adding like 6, 7, 8 pieces on their team.
Let's get to the losers at the deadline. Dank, who is one of your biggest losers at this trade deadline?
Oh, I think the Nuggets are up there for biggest losers. I did think the piece that they should have added as a backup big, kind of just to spell Jokic, and hopefully just survive the 10 minutes a game that he's on the bench in the playoffs. And I think Thomas Bryant is a decent fit for that. But just in terms of, the surrounding teams and all the massive upgrade they got, I really think probably hurts the Nuggets championship chances the most out of any team at the deadline. So they're probably, the top of the list for losers at this point for me.
Gallagher, your thoughts on the Nuggets deadline?
Yeah, the second round picks. We talked about this a little bit, and we just said I thought they needed another wing, right? Who cares about your non-center minutes? I mean, Jokic is going to play so many of them. I think they're filling it in another way, maybe playing smaller, trusting Zeke Naju's been playing better. I think it would have been better suited to go after another wing to spell Aaron Gordon and play that way. I just think wing defense is so important, especially in the West. I mean, let's look at the standings. Just so many good teams, excluding the Nuggets. You've got just need somebody to guard Luka. McDaniels could guard, or other people can guard Josh. You're getting beat by perimeter scoring. Kyrie, that's all perimeter scoring, excluding them. So I thought they would have been better suited to go that direction. But I don't hate it. Certainly, it makes sense, right? But I think they just had especially when you're giving away Bones Highland. He was the guy who was so sought after 2 months ago. And to get very little to show for it is a little bit of a disappointment.
Yeah, I think you walk into this deadline as the Nuggets looking like you feel you're in control of the Western Conference, and then all of these different moves happen, and I think the objects are appearing closer in the rearview mirror than they may actually seem in the standings right now. And on top of that, I agree with you, Mike. I thought the biggest need was for a wing and another defender, just because you can never have too many of them come playoff time. And so the combination of everybody else getting better, an asset that you thought was increasing in value and was a compelling long-term asset that you hit the nail on the head with the draft pick with Bones Highland completely dissipates and is dust. You get 2 second-round picks for that. So you lose that young upside talent. You don't add anything to the win now window now, which I don't think the window is ever going to be stronger for Denver than right now. I granted things change with the Kevin Durant trade and whatnot, but I don't know how they weren't on the phone, and I'm sure they were, but I don't know how they don't come to agreement with a deal with some of the wings that Phoenix had their hands on, that Brooklyn had their hands on after the Phoenix trade. Jay Crowder gets moved to Milwaukee. Maybe Jay Crowder was only targeting Milwaukee. He played college ball there. There could be things there behind the scenes, but McDaniels was relatively affordable. There weren't a ton of defensive wings moved at the deadline, but there were ones that seemed available. OG Anunoby seemed available, although the price tags there seemed like they were potentially rich. I just think that this was a really missed opportunity to push the chips in the middle on a team that looked like they were in the best position that they've been in during any point in this run. And so I think it's a big, big lost opportunity for Denver. I think, for me, they're 1 or 2 in terms of deadline losers. And the other team there is the Chicago Bulls, which I don't know what to say about the Chicago Bulls right now, other than they're 26-28. Their best player is a 33-year-old. Their second best player is an impending free agent. And their third best player was just signed to a long-term contract, and really the only guy that they even kind of considered moving at the deadline. They have no young assets that you're really excited about to look forward to. Maybe Patrick Williams can get better, but he's been in the league a while now and he hasn't gotten substantially better. They have no draft picks coming because they basically could get a Portland pick that turns into a 1 if they are outside the lottery, which is looking unlikely now. It looks like Portland will probably be in the lottery, so they're not going to have a first-round pick. I don't know how you don't like the mistake that they made with the Vooch trade, which they gave up Wendell Carter Jr. and what turned out to be Franz Wagner in the 7th pick and another first-round pick. I don't know how you don't get out of that deal by at least recouping some value from Vooch or from DeRozan, or reset things with Levine or Caruso. Caruso's that's another guy I thought the Nuggets should have been in on. Caruso's an ideal fit for a contender and a player whose value is most valuable to a contender, because a non-contender, he does all the little things really well. It doesn't matter if you're a non-contender, and he has durability issues. And so he's not a guy that's going to help you get through the regular season, but he's a guy who's going to be really impactful in the playoffs for the 15 minutes he plays or whatever. And so I just thought it's an incredible lost opportunity for a franchise that has been known for the last 2 decades for being stagnant and not being creative. In this new front office, when they first came in, they at least made moves that it was like, okay, they're going to pick a direction. The direction they've picked sucks. It's mediocrity without a future. And so I don't know how you stay in this lane. It's just totally insane to me. So the Bulls, an unbelievable deadline loser to me, and like such a huge magnitude in terms of how it impacts the NBA. It doesn't impact it at all because the Bulls are irrelevant. They're completely irrelevant. They're going to be irrelevant for the next few years because of this stagnant approach to the deadline. So, I grew up a Bulls fan. They've lost me quite a bit over the years. This deadline was just outrageous. As many will put it on Twitter, poverty franchise, just a joke to not make a move at the deadline. Gallagher, your thoughts?
Their direction is no direction. Like they're just sitting there, man. Like why do you even have a front office? Do you know how big front offices now are? They're like there's a whole office full of people just doing nothing. And what are we doing, man? I just don't get how you could be satisfied to look at your team and just like, oh yeah, we're almost in the playoffs year after year after year after year, and you've got all these guys with nobody to come. Like, what are you gonna do in 2 years? You're stuck. It's terrible management, man. I don't like Vooch. I don't know how Vooch is still on the team. It just makes no sense to me, man. It's horrible. You covered it and really well said, so I don't want to add too much, but just a disaster to not do anything. I hate that. Like tank. I actually like when people tank just to have direction, and this is just frustrating.
Yeah, they're at least some. I know it's funny in the sense that
you have a front office, use it.
So you're tanking, so you're like not trying, but you actually are trying to get better. This is nothing. This is not trying. Yeah. This is quiet quitting. The Chicago Bulls are quiet quitting. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, we like loud quitters here. Like let's show some effort in being a quitter.
Dank, any thoughts on the Bulls?
Not too much. No, I actually want to pivot to the Heat a little bit. I am very surprised by how stagnant the East stayed because there's even a quote from Spoelstra, I think from yesterday or the day before, about how this is the most wide open the Eastern Conference and maybe the NBA has been for years, and we're so used to Pat Riley being aggressive here. I'm really surprised that the Heat didn't make a move of some sort. Obviously, Kyle Lowry has been kind of in the mix for trade rumors, and I'm just really surprised they didn't say that they didn't make a move because there may be 7 deep at this point that you feel confident trying out there in a playoff series. I think this was a decent opportunity for them to make a move with kind of the Nets bowing out and them being a solid 5th contender behind the top 4 we see on the screen there, and I'm just really surprised that they didn't do anything.
I think the issue with the Heat is just lack of assets. Like what could they reasonably have moved? Because any move that they could have made, they have nothing. They have nothing of interest to anybody else except Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler. You're probably not moving those guys if you're trying to contend this year. So Kyle Lowry is like the only thing that you're dangling around out there. And I think a few teams had a little bit of interest, like the Clippers, because like a total lack of point guard situation, maybe Minnesota and then Mike Conley type of thing. But I don't think there were a lot of opportunities there. And then from a draft pick compensation standpoint, they gave up all those draft picks to get Jimmy. So I don't know that they really have much in the wheelbarrow. I think they're basically they're a little bit ahead of the Bulls in terms of like the same type of frustration and situation. The difference being that they actually have a player in Jimmy Butler that can help elevate you come playoff time, and Bam Adebayo, both players that elevate you come playoff time, as of course to the Bulls who have, really none. But yeah, it's a tough spot. I mean, realistically, the only big fish they could have shot out for would have been trading Hero and trying to turn that into something. And I don't know. That's a tough one for me. Gallagher, did you think there were opportunities for the Heat to make moves that would change the direction for them?
The only thing that I thought that would have worked for them, given the way they wanted to turn the franchise into a better roster, would have been trading him to Minnesota. So once that happened, I don't think the Clippers were like interested, but the Heat would have wanted stuff that the Heat wouldn't want to give up.
Right.
They didn't have enough to give up, so they kind of were stuck. It's just no one was willing to give them what they wanted. Unless they pushed draft picks or something.
They tried to push their chips in the middle of this offseason with like the rumors for KD and stuff. They came up empty. And they never filled that PJ Tucker void from a salary perspective, from a roster spot perspective. And from that point on, once they decided to hang around with Oladipo, they were kind of done. I just don't think they could make any moves. The other team that was stagnant, Dank, was your Cleveland Cavaliers. I saw some people upset on Twitter about that. I really don't know what the Cavs could have done. Like I don't know what they could have added that would have made people happy. Like they took all their big swings in the offseason. And I mean, Dank, you're more tuned into Cavs and Cavs fandom. What did the people of Cleveland want on this roster that wasn't on it already?
Yeah, just a somewhat more reliable three and D wing than Karis LeVert and Isaac Okoro, but those are tough to come by, and I don't think the Cavs wanted to give up assets to kind of go and get that. I think Ricky Rubio coming back for them in the second half is a little bit of kind of like a deadline addition, and that he'll help steady the second unit. And Okoro really has turned a corner the last couple of weeks. There's been a lot of commentary about how he's the first one in the gym every day. It's a battle between him and Donovan Mitchell pretty much to get there first, and he loves pulling into the parking lot when no one else is there, and staying late. And his shot has started to fall a bit more. He's been more aggressive, and so I think they felt pretty comfortable with where they're at this point. I really don't know how much there was for them to add. Obviously the Donovan Mitchell trade was massive for them, and again Rubio, and Kevin Love has been a DNP CD the last few games, so maybe he can be more of a factor down in the stretch. But yeah, ultimately if they could have made a big swing for a 3-and-D wing, I think that would have been the piece. But even someone like Jalen McDaniels, I'm not sure he's necessarily an upgrade over what they already have. So I think it was, relatively predictive or relatively expected that, they didn't make a big move here.
I think the only guy that I thought would have fit the team well would have been Sadiq Bey. Get a little more shooting. I think one more spot up shooter would be really valuable to the middle or back end of that rotation. The price wasn't too high, so I think that's probably the only one if I had to nitpick on it. But yeah, like you said, they made their move. They're already really good. You're banking on improvement from Mobley. You're banking on Garland getting even a little bit better. It's a good bet. So
shooting wing there with Mobley hasn't been able to stretch the floor. I think we were expecting a bigger leap from him in terms of 3-point shooting. He's been horrible in that department this year, and obviously Jared Allen lives in the paint. So I definitely Sadiq Bey. That's an interesting name. I hadn't thought about that. That would have been a solid fit. But yeah, I think at this point, I think they're okay moving forward.
Yeah, I mean the cost there though is something that they might not have had. You know what I mean? Like, do they have 5 seconds? Do they have a James Weissman prospect that interests Detroit? It's one of those things where I think some teams just have the resources and others don't, and they poured a lot of resources in the Donovan Mitchell trade, which has worked out great. Moving to Detroit, because they for me are big losers as well. Detroit, I don't know what the hell you're doing. Like every deadline, you are out here trying to accumulate someone else's garbage and turn it into your gold at a position that you just drafted a player that looks promising in Jalen Duren. Last year it was Bagley. This year it's James Weissman. I get the idea of theoretically taking shots on young players and trying to recoup their value. But when you're doing it with an asset that you've already invested in, you're just kind of competing them against each other and maybe screwing up all their development in terms of giving opportunities. I would much rather have Sadiq Bey on this roster long-term than James Weissman. I don't understand. They keep Bojan Bogdanovic. They keep Alec Burks. Yeah. They don't move any of the vets. It just makes no sense to me whatever they're trying to accomplish. They did the same thing with Jeremy Grant, where they signed him and then just didn't move him at the deadline. And then in the offseason, they make him move for pennies on the dollar. I don't understand what the point of anything that Detroit is doing in this rehabilitation thing for Weissman, who is got a lot of talent, but has not shown anything that's been productive in the NBA in terms of winning basketball. I don't understand how, what the idea is. If you rehabilitate his value, it's probably at the expense of Jalen Duren's value. So even if you're winning in this situation by rehabilitating his value, it's probably hurt someone else's value that you've been trying to rehabilitate, Bagley or Duren. These guys all can't coexist. So it just doesn't make any sense to me. Gallagher, what were your thoughts here on the Pistons?
I would have been so excited to see Weissman land on San Antonio, just a team that just has no front court. Of all the teams who are bad, the Pistons are the worst, right? I mean, they've got Duren. I love Duren, my guy, Jalen Duren. They can't play together. They can't space. Duren showed he could play 30 minutes when he's going. So I get it. I think it makes sense. I just wish that they went with something else. But I get it. If you want to make a big bet, that's what they thought was the bet they wanted to make. I would have liked to see them maybe unload Isaiah Stewart or something along those lines. So I don't hate it as much as you, with respect of going after Weissman, because young bigs take time to develop, Nick Claxton, et cetera, et cetera. But get rid of Burks, get rid of Boyan. I mean, come on, man. It's like Bulls light. They did do something,
but they also like, I get the idea is like Sadiq Bey a couple years ago was valued less than Weissman, but they traded a good like a solid young player or a player that you could develop at a position of need for. It's like what could be in the box, a boat or whatever's in the box. It could even be a boat in the box. It's just so dumb to me.
Yeah,
like it's not.
Just with them having Duren there already, like you said, it's just going to eat into kind of the upside and like the leeway that you can give those players. And when you look at the depth chart and you see Stewart, Bagley, Duren, Wiseman, those are kind of all like the same molds. What are you getting out of those guys in the NBA in 2023?
And like
not
look
much.
at these wings. Look at the wings that they have to build around in the future.
Well, they clearly are going to keep Bojan around apparently for next year and
right, but like
try and do something. But
3 years from now, is there a single wing player that is in the rotation 3 years from now on this roster right now? No.
I mean, they want to be Bojan, but who cares? Like 3 years from now, Bojan's not.
So what are you doing trading away Sadiq Bey? It just it makes no sense to me. That's the thing that makes.
It's like when you're in a fantasy league and you're trying to make a trade with someone. And you want this guy, and they keep trying to give you back. Everyone wanted Sadiq Bey. Hey, I want Sadiq Bey.
Yeah,
Sadiq Bey. Like, okay, fine, take Sadiq Bey. Like they just kind of gave into it.
Just, I thought it was a really, really bad deadline for them. I think when you're a bad team and you have veteran players that other teams in the league would want, you got to unload them. Like, and you're not close. Detroit is not close. Detroit's not close to being close.
Yeah.
So like. Just a disaster for them.
They are Bruno Cabocloing it.
I thought Charlotte was a mild loser as well. They got nothing for Plumlee and McDaniels essentially. So a deadline where they had some pieces that people were interested in, they get nothing for. But I'm not gonna. The pieces weren't that great. Could they have turned them into a little bit more? Possibly, but I have no big issues there. Thoughts on what
Minnesota? Let's just stay on Charlotte really quick to knock it out. Mark Williams, fantasy biggest winner of the day, like no doubt about it.
Yep.
No doubt about it, man. We are going to get full on Mark Williams season. Garcia has prices. He's been awesome per minute. Shout out to me. I told my guy Adam Schefter to stash him like 3-4 weeks ago, and I got the excited text. So I paid him off with his time for hiking with me on Tuesday with the best fantasy pickup. So. Love it. I love it. For anybody who stashed Mark Williams, has got to be pretty happy about it. Nick Richards too. Definitely worth the pickup. He's pretty capable of playing 20 minutes, but it's definitely Mark Williams season going forward.
For sure. Let's flip to that kind of conversation. Outside of Mark Williams, biggest winners at the deadline from a fantasy DFS season-long perspective for you, Mike?
Oh boy, I wish I put that list together. Obviously those two guys. I think Zach Collins is a guy that makes sense. Malachi Brandon is a guy that definitely makes sense. Do you have a list? Well, I'm just kind of doing this on the fly.
No, I was thinking. Yeah. Go ahead, Dank.
I think Sexton in Utah is a pretty big winner with Utah them guys shipping out multiple guards. He should get see a decent amount of minutes moving forward and kind of have some more usage heading his way.
Yeah. Devontae Graham, another name that was moved from New Orleans to San Antonio. He was pretty buried in New Orleans. There's a lot of opportunity to play in San Antonio just because they don't have a ton of bodies. He was a fantasy relevant player a few years ago in Charlotte, largely because of his ability to contribute 3-pointers. He's not a very efficient scorer, so it's a very niche category thing for him. I don't think he'll go back to having the role that he had in Charlotte back in the day, which was like starting point guard. For deep leagues, he would be a speculative guy to pick up in like a 10 or 12 team league. I don't think he'd be worth it personally. I think they're going to focus on the development of Malachi Branham and eventually Blake Wesley and Trey Jones, obviously when Trey Jones gets healthy. So I think Devontae Graham's still going to play a very limited role there, but there's the potential on a non-contending team for more minutes to open up.
I think Jalen Williams, Lynn Williams for the Thunder. They shipped out Mike Muscala and Baisley, so that crowded front court gets a little thinner for him. But decent winner there, I think.
Yeah, I think so. They're going to get JRE back, Jeremiah Robinson Earl back, but I mean, he's played really well. He spaces the floor. He's been guarding in the post really well. He's been awesome. So yeah, I have him on my 30-man team. So I'm hoping he. I have Dink will be happy. I have Lynn and Len Williams on my 30-man team.
Just need Rich.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I don't have Rich yet. Maybe I'll try to trade for him.
Need Rich.
But
yeah. What about for the Rockets? Is Tari Eason? Is he going to get more 3 minutes maybe because they shipped out Gordon and Garrison Matthews is now gone. I think they're going to waive, John Wall and Danny Green, who they got. So just probably more minutes for him. I don't know if Josh Christopher will get more there too at the 2 guard for them, but certainly some more minutes.
Yeah, I think Tari is definitely a winner. We saw when they were shorthanded and missed Jay Shot. It would have been a little bit better if they got rid of Tate, if they got rid of KJ Martin and really cleared out the 3 minutes.
Yeah, or Tate.
Yeah, Tate. One more guy would have been a little bit better. So I wouldn't say he's a winner.
Yeah,
but hey, I mean, this team's really bad. They're losing games. They're going up 130, 140, 150 every night. So having him on your roster and see what happens with this new rotation, I think is just worth seeing because we know he's just totally smashed and like if he gets a 22-minute role, he'll be like really valuable.
Yeah. One other team before we get out of here because we have to get out of here in a few minutes to give us a little breather before the DFS show. One other team I just wanted to tackle, and I struggle whether to put them in the winners or the losers category because it kind of depends on where you put the timeline stamp in terms of where you're starting the analysis. But Golden State, they essentially, from last offseason, turned James Weissman into Gary Payton II. So from last offseason, they basically let James Weissman walk and paid Gary Payton. Is essentially Gary Payton fit perfectly in this system last year, was a big reason that they ended up winning the NBA Finals as a key rotation contributor. Weissman was clearly not working out at all in Golden State. From that perspective, they certainly got better today from the perspective of, hey, you drafted James Weissman ahead of LaMelo Ball, and this is what it results in. You getting literally nothing because you had Gary Payton on the roster last year and you let him walk. So you get literally nothing for a guy you drafted in the top 5. That seems like not a winner, but they obviously got better today and this team is a little bit better positioned. The one thing for me is like, it's still kind of I thought you could turn it into something better than Gary Payton. I know Gary Payton fits their system very well, but I thought in terms of like Gary Payton's never going to be a long-term asset for them that they can flip into anything else. Right. So like, I thought they could have done better, whether it's not like quality of name, whether it's like a Pirtle or something like that. I thought they could have done more.
I'm good with that though. I said I wanted to get another wing defender. What'd they get? They got one. What else? I mean, sure. Would you have liked another big? I wouldn't want a big. I want a wing really bad. And they love Gary. It's really hard to fit into the Warriors system, man. We see so many guys go in and out. Dante clear fit. But now he just fits your scheme so well. His offensive growth has been better. His rim finishing on the rim. Like, hey, we've got all these questions. We don't know who could guard. We don't know who fits. Let's just go get Gary Payton 2 back. I think that was a really smart move, honestly. So I would give him a win. Certainly not a big one. Like I said, rather hit a single and drive 2 runs in. Maybe steal second. And I guess they wouldn't steal second. They would have had to trade it. But yeah, sorry. Dad joke there, but but I thought that was a good trade. I think because I think I even said like, oh, they need someone like Gary Payton to fill that role. They got Gary Payton, so
they got someone just.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah. Tank,
what's the yeah? Go ahead, Tank.
No, not too much. I agree with you. The return for Wiseman's a little underwhelming, just in the grand scheme of things. But at this stage, relatively. I don't know if underperforming is the right word, but at least hasn't lived up to the hype now in terms of a center, in the modern NBA isn't too great of an asset. So I do think, just getting Gary Payton back for this year is solid. And, as you mentioned, he's a great fit as we know already on the Warriors. So I think it's fine. It doesn't move the needle too much for me.
Yeah. All right. Before we get out of here, a couple programming notes from us. First and foremost, 5:00 Eastern, behind the paywall at Established Run. Myself and Mike Gallagher will be breaking down this 4-game DFS slate. Catch us there. Secondly, for ETR subscribers of all kinds, arguably the best DFS player in history of DFS is going to be doing a Q&A tonight, 8:00 in the general channel. Utica, who reached out to me earlier today, said he was feeling in a giving mood and was actually wanting to hop on the show with us. I thought we had too many people at the time, so sorry, Cow. Fan got pulled last second, but he's going to do an AMA with us in the Discord in the general channel tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern. The guy's just been dominating the DFS streets for many, many years, and especially in the last year and a half. If everybody can argue whoever they think is the best DFS player of all time, but he has every right to that mantle as well. So hop in the Discord tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern time, and participate in the Ask Me Anything with Utica. All right. For myself, Mike Gallagher, Mark Dankenbring, and all of the second round picks that were traded in today's NBA trade deadline, we want to thank you all for joining us for this trade deadline analysis show. We will see you tomorrow, 2:00 Eastern, for another edition of Established Run's NBA Injury Report analysis show. And we'll see you behind the paywall in a half hour for the DFS show tonight, Established Show, myself and Mike Gallagher. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time.